All right, hello, welcome everyone to Star Trek from the Holodeck. This is the Strange New Worlds edition, and we're discussing Strange New Worlds, Season 3, Episode 5, titled Through the Lens of Time. If you are new to our podcast, you can find most of our shows wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search From the Holodeck. If you are an Apple Podcast listener, please take the time to give us a rating and even possibly a review. That would be incredibly helpful. And for those who want even more content, head over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/RainmanDigital, and subscribe. We have options ranging from $1 to $5 for those who want more discussions on Star Trek. Okay, so David, this particular episode of Strange New Worlds really works to bring a number of narrative elements together.
A lot of narrative elements together.
Yeah, arranging them in a way that creates, I would call, a type of holistic synergy between various concepts, themes, and story ideas that the episode brings to the forefront. Elements that, upon reflection, Dave, become increasingly noticeable, starting with this specific season. Things that we thought might have been the end suddenly become more relevant. And David, I just got to say, that's how you write a season of a TV show.
Yeah.
Don't let those narrative nuggets that really worked in episode 1 or episode 2 just fall away. Just because you're not a traditional serial, you're a bit of a hybrid, you can bring those narrative anchors, those narrative nuggets over between episodes because it just creates a level of consistency and fluidity to the season that just makes the show itself feel right. So for one, David, if people are wondering what I'm talking about, the intent or narrative teleology behind, for example, using the Gorn has now evolved into a means of continuing to flesh out the mysteries of the cosmos. Essentially, the Star Trek ethos, which is to seek out new life and new civilizations, has been employed to express a much richer theme, one that surpasses its earlier, more novel form. And this is the subtle way that you bring that theme, the Star Trek ethos, to seek out new life and new civilizations. This is how you bring out something without breaking the fourth wall. It was one of my complaints in Star Trek Picard Season 3, which I loved. It was near perfect. There was a moment, I think in the third episode, where they literally said to seek out new life
and new civilization. Why did you do this?
But this is the same thing. What this season is doing, specifically with this episode we're going to be going through today, this is the correct method of doing that. Now, this episode was written by Onitra Johnson and Davy Perez, who is quickly becoming not just one of my favorite television writers, but becoming one of my more dependable Star Trek writers that I can rely on. Meaning, if I see his name on the list of credits, I'm like, you know what? This is going to be an interesting episode. And if for people that are unaware of Davy Perez's background, I believe he made his bones on Supernatural.
On Supernatural, that's right.
And he wrote some pretty fucking great episodes during his tenure there. Very horror. I mean, yes, Supernatural in itself is a supernatural show, but it doesn't always delve into the horrific in the later seasons, which is, I believe, the seasons that Davy Perez was involved in. He's one of the writers that was responsible with bringing back those more horror elements to Supernatural after it had been missing for several seasons.
Yes.
So that's kind of Davy Perez's jam. He's also the one that wrote the 2 Gorn episodes from the first season, I believe, the first and second season. So, Dave, can we now say that Star Trek Strange New Worlds is the first Star Trek to incorporate, not accidentally, not just in one episode, but actually incorporate the horror genre into its form?
That's what I was going to tell you. Not accidentally. It's doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I really do enjoy about this season is, like, you get this sense that the showrunner and the writers are really testing their own boundaries when it comes to storytelling in Star Trek. Whereas in the past, Star Trek has tried, oh, we're going to do a musical episode and stuff like that and try to be cute and
Zany,
zany or
whimsical.
or tried to break the fourth wall time for us
Yeah.
and have us a good laugh. But in actuality, doing what they're doing in Supernatural, especially with Davy Perez, brings a more serious, almost mature tone to the franchise.
Yeah.
And when you can see the franchise actually delve into stories like this and actually do these stories that help not just set the tone for the franchise, but also kind of broaden the history and the mythos of what the franchise is. That's a good writer.
Yeah.
That's a good showrunner. That's a good producer.
And also, if you can bring in those elements, those things, exploratory measures, trying to branch out, make something new out of Star Trek, and you're able to do that without breaking Star Trek, that's rare. Because any fucking hack, Dave, can come into a TV show and say, you know what, I'm going to do something different with this show. I'm going to do, I know there's been, and I'm not just pointing to Star Trek, but I can use numerous IP examples in our modern era where you just have some dude thinking, yeah, I know that. I can do that. And no, you have a very superficial, thin understanding of what you're working in right now. Whereas Davy Perez does seem to operate at a level of keen insight. Like, he has a keen insight in Star Trek. He understands Star Trek and he understands the horror genre. And it feels like he is walking that tightrope perfectly. He knows how far he can push.
Well, that's the big thing there is, like, I think a lot of people feel that you have to be a quote unquote fan to work on a franchise, right? You have to be a fan because you have to know your franchise, know what universe you're working in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think nowadays a lot of people have that misconception because they don't go a step further and say, you not only have to be a fan, you have to have the skill to do it. Yeah. Just because you know what emblem so-and-so wore in episode 102 of TNG does not make you qualified to write a TV show.
I would also argue being a fan of something isn't always a good thing, because must I point to Jon Favreau and The Mandalorian and Dave Filoni and Ahsoka? Like, those two shows are so severely flawed in my belief because they can't separate their own fandoms, their own fan wishes from the content itself. Sometimes you can understand something and you can be, okay, for example, let me point to Tony Gilroy.
There you go.
Tony Gilroy, the showrunner for Andor, has publicly stated that he's never been a huge fan of Star Wars, but he's watched it, he understands it, he gets it, and that's why he is the only individual post Lucas that has really given us something in TV form that really stands strong as original and yet also works within the boundaries of what Star Wars should be. I feel like Davy Perez is similar. Now, I don't know his history. He may be a fan of Star Trek, or he just may be aware of Star Trek and he's done his due diligence. And I have no problem with that either. There's plenty of people in academia that write in depth about something, but what do they do first? They do their research.
Yeah.
They spend several months, years, 3, 4, 5 years researching. And if that's what Davy Perez is doing, then I don't really care if you're a fan of an IP, as long as you understand what you're working within and you can write, you have talent. And that's something that is in fact coming through with Strange New World, specifically season 3. It's incredibly consistent. They are pushing the envelope without breaking anything. Yes. And that's why this episode in itself is very strong. I mean, look at the season as a whole. I mean, we had Gorn, body horror, sci-fi, survivalist type horror, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Then we had zombie horror. Now we have demonic possession.
You have Event Horizon meets Star Trek.
A little bit of Lovecraftian vibes there. Elder gods. I mean, what is happening? And yet it really does work.
Mm-hmm.
It's working within, I guess you can say, what Star Trek should be in terms of canon. All right, so let's preview a few talking points, David. This episode works on numerous characters, developing them further while underscoring the emotional and psychological pressures that they are experiencing. Spock still working through the issues he has with Chapel and Corby.
And Corby.
I mean, he's doing just fine. Like, what do they say? The best way to get over someone is move on to someone else.
Move on to someone hotter.
In terms, yeah, there you go. I'm not, when it comes to personal growth, I'm not for that. But for sheer vindictiveness,
Exactly.
then yes. Also, the discovery of a new hostile species, which we've been alluding to, one that appears to be a natural enemy of the Gorn. Also, the introduction or retelling of an ancient civilization that discovered immortality. The idea of evil has been thrust back into Star Trek as well, but with a narrative and philosophical intent that generates questions about the nature of evil.
Yes.
Because that's how you do it in Star Trek. Evil can't just stand by itself in Star Trek. You can't just push evil into the setting and expect for Star Trek fans to accept it. You have to pose those philosophical questions along with the idea or notion of evil. All right, David. So what were it seems like you're on the same page with me here. It seems like we were both pretty excited about this episode, but just in a nutshell, what were your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts of this episode is by far this is my favorite episode.
Really?
As of right now. Because of this is the one episode where I look back and I see that this is an episode where you can literally look at the episode time and time again and pull things out that are Star Trek related. Just like what you alluded to earlier, there's a lot of doors that Davy Perez and all the other writers that focused in on this episode have kind of creaked open and allowed us as Star Trek fans to peer in and say, okay, let's see if we can go this route or over here, and kind of broaden out the idea of the Star Trek universe. To not sound too cheesy, but go beyond the Great Barrier. to go beyond the Great Barrier, maybe see Cybok again.
Yeah.
But this episode, honestly, is my favorite also because of a lot of the character growth they did here. They tackled at least 4 to 5 characters, and all of them went forward. No one went backwards. You didn't have any character assassination. You kept their character growth going forward, which is odd to me. When I look at other shows and I see some shows, the character growth will stall for 2 episodes and then it'll pick up.
Yeah.
But here,
you have complete narrative expansion all across the board.
Complete narrative expansion to the point that I, as a viewer, am really excited to see where they're going for the next episode. Because remember, since we started watching season 3, my main fear was inconsistency. You have a good episode, you have a great episode, you have a subpar episode, you have a great episode, you have a subpar episode. Season 3 has geared up where it's okay, we've had these episodes, but now, because there's this narrative cohesion between all 3 of them, we're looking at the episodes that we said, we're quote unquote weak, and now they have more of a purpose to them.
Yeah.
And it's especially with this episode, when you put the other episodes to it, the puzzle pieces are starting to fall into place.
Yeah, they're doing a really good job. I would agree with you. It's all about the puzzle pieces. I guess every episode is a small part of the whole. And I know that sounds silly because, you have a full season and you have individual episodes. Yes.
However.
Yeah. However, oftentimes TV shows are not as connected as they should be. And even though this season, or I should say Strange New Worlds as a whole, is not considered your typical serial, it's in fact it leans more into the episodic. They are in fact connecting themes. And that's something that is helping the season feel more full and more interconnected. That was a problem we had with the second season. It wasn't bad. The second season was awesome. But if we had to nitpick and point, it's the fact that it felt a little more disjointed as opposed to the first season that was also working within themes that interconnected between episodes. And now season 3 is doing the exact same thing that made the first season so strong, but I would say even doing it that much more better. This is now a seasoned writing room. These are writers and producers now that have been sitting in here for 3 seasons. They kind of have a system, right? They get what direction they're going. They know what types of stories they want to tell. And an episode like this is an example of a very confident writing room. They're confident with their ideas. Not just this episode, but even the episode that had zombies. Because you have to be confident.
When you say that,
that's my point.
It's like,
that's my point. Because it sounds ridiculous.
So bad. It sounds ridiculous.
That's my point. It sounds so ridiculous for zombies to be in Star Trek, but they are so confident. Because on paper, I would feel so insecure with this concept. Like, here, sir, zombies. I turned in my script, sir. But they're so confident this season. You feel it. And this is the type of Star Trek I want, David. I want Star Trek to push the fucking envelope.
This writing room reminds me of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. That writing room. I mean, me and you covered the documentary on the DS9 crew. You look at the writer room there. Yes, we've already know who's in that writing room. We know their accolades. But when they get together, it's like they know everything.
Yeah.
It's interesting watching a writing room know cohesion. There's a narrative consistency between every writer.
It's synergy.
There's the word synergy.
Yeah.
And here in Strange New Worlds, you get a sense like, there's a synergy going on in this room where from episode to episode, season 3, it's like the writers go, okay, you handled that. I'll make sure and actually connect your episode to my episode.
Yeah.
And it might be 2 episodes down the line, but we'll build it up slowly so that people don't forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing to me because after I watched this particular episode, there was a lot of chatter of how like people are going, oh my God, it makes sense now about this episode in the back. They're alluding to this from the second episode.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's called narrative cohesion.
And not only that, they're creating a lot of discussion. Now, of course, whenever there's positive, there's going to be negative. But there's also a lot of positive discussion. It's actually this season is creating what I would call water cooler moments. People are talking about it. I'm not saying like Joe Schmo working at the local call center is talking about Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
But us on social media, we're actually having good conversations for once with fellow fans rather than either defending Star Trek or being called shills. We see people actually enjoying it, and there's actually real discussion happening.
You mean like on our YouTube shorts last time?
Yeah. All right, so let's move into this a little more formally, Dave. There's a few things that we need to get out there because this is a very deep episode. There's a lot there. And we're going to try to tackle the more important things. It's impossible to get into everything in under an hour, but we're going to do our best. So I guess let's stay with, let's talk about Roddenberry because this is going to be important. The episode cleverly adheres to the Roddenberry-esque principles of confrontation in Star Trek. And this is something that we talk about a lot, while also winking at alternative possibilities. For example, the issues of communication and misunderstandings, like taking the idea of the Gorn, who many were thinking the Strange New Worlds producers were turning into a new type of cosmic evil, But as we learned this season, the Gorn's cosmological underpinnings present a different image, one that makes them essentially a part of nature, as we have discussed, a cosmic force. So it removes any moral descriptors or characterizations, any labels, any moral labels that you could slap on them have now been removed, and you can't put them there because they are a cosmic force.
Yes.
Which is more aligned with confrontation being connected to issues of communication and cultural differences that are not immediately understood, which is part of Roddenberry's overall philosophy as it pertains to Star Trek. I bring this up, David, because it's important to keep this in mind while we talk about the Vesda. Is that the name? The Vesda.
Vesda.
Yeah, because while the producers are seemingly painting them as true evil, as Palia clearly articulates, it's done with a wink-wink. Meaning, the Vesda, while possibly being truly evil, the last line Palia says to, was his name Beto?
Yes.
Beto Ortega's, do you need one for the camera? It softens the possibility.
Yeah.
It signals that tightrope that I was talking about earlier, that these writers must walk on in order to create compelling stories that raises the stakes and keeps true to what Trek is supposed to be at the same time. Because evilness in its form, in its understood Zoroastrian roots, it can't exist in Star Trek.
Yeah. And that's that is the, I know that there's a lot of fans who are listening to us thinking that we're crazy because there's certainly evil characters that fans gravitate towards. You know, people will call Khan evil, Gul Dukat evil. They'll call the embodiment of evil in Armis from Skin of Evil, the TNG episode.
Armis was more of a unexplained metaphysical phenomenon that was created by a species that shed their negativity.
But that's the beautiful thing of Star Trek. Nothing is necessarily evil in its purest form. There's always a caveat.
Yeah, right.
You know, especially with like the Vesda in this one, they had to throw in the fact that, the Vesda have been imprisoned. Why were they imprisoned? Because they were just fighting this, other force, and they quote unquote lost to the force, so they were imprisoned here. So the audience automatically just thinks, well, they were in prison, they must have been bad people or bad entities. Not necessarily. That's the thing that I love about this episode, because truly Star Trek, the Star Trek-isms come out because you go much like a character like Armis, where he's a natural phenomenon that was created because of the negativity of the world around that got destroyed. Or take, for example, the Gorn in like How Strange New Worlds has dealt with them. Normally you would say they're a evil force, right? But they've gone on to explain that they're a natural occurring force.
Right. So the point is that every time they characterize something as evil, what do all Star Trek writers do since the dawn of time? They may present as evil at first, and then through various episodes, seasons, years may go by, they smooth it out and recontextualize.
Yes.
All right, so keeping with the Vesda, the episode uses myth and astronomical cosmology to introduce not just new characters or beings, but a concept suggesting that ancient humanity's, and this is really cool, fascination with resurrection and reincarnation could in fact be rooted in forgotten technology, specifically the idea that the subatomic instability was harnessed as a means of achieving immortality. Okay, so however, phase shifting, I believe was the term they used, through dimensions to attain this immortality had an unintended side effect. It brought something through, something from somewhere else. Event Horizon. Anyone?
Yes.
And this is the Vesda, essentially characterized as a type of demon. That's pretty much what they were doing.
Yes.
And all of this unfolds through an exploratory narrative method composed of clues and other esoteric mysteries that, once solved, reward the audience with answers and plot resolutions. These are my favorite types of episodes, Dave, of Star Trek.
Oh, yeah.
The away team that must figure out this
Yes.
ancient civilization that is so different from anything that we can understand. But by the end of the episode, we learn a little bit about ourselves, a little bit about our own myths and beliefs. I mean, right there again, staying true to Gene Roddenberry's view of the world, which is an atheistic view, an atheistic outlook, removing the divine, even concepts like the idea of resurrection and reincarnation, things that most people would agree are ideas stemmed from theological and or religious and spiritual beliefs. But what does Star Trek always do? Star Trek always reminds, certainly spiritualism exists in Star Trek, spiritual practices, we've seen them, and even religious practices, but they've always been explained through some form of science.
Yes.
Even man's creation has been explained through the introduction of the progenitors.
The progenitor.
So this is just more of the same. Star Trek working within that similar sandbox. Now, the crew of the Enterprise concludes that the mysterious site on Macroon was essentially a prison constructed by an unknown and highly advanced civilization. Now, David, see, you're already laughing. There are questions about this civilization that created the prison. Who were they, or who are they if they are still around? Dave, you and I,
There's so many fun things to think about.
we were going to have a list of possibilities and theories, I think, but we weren't able to get to it. Actually, no, we will get to it. But first, I want to wrap up a few things.
Okay.
Okay, so as we know, Star Trek is not your regular show where writers do things simply because of the obvious. Trek is complex, with multiple layers of meaning and intent. So, with the Gorn, for example, being recontextualized as cosmic, removing any moralizing efforts that could be attached to them, and now pairing them with the Vesda, having one of them react to Spock because of his mind meld with Batel, and then, of course, the sudden innate aversion or instinctive repulsion between Batel and
Gamble.
the Vesda that was
Vesda.
possessing Gamble. Yeah.
Yep.
We get an even bigger picture of the Gorn's cosmic legacy and its ancient origins as being almost like natural enemies with the Vesda, or a type of reciprocal predation relationship where both species prey on each other. Now, what I like about this season so far is that it is attempting to do new things. Sure, the Gorn are not new, but what we have is an ongoing reassessment. And this reassessment is challenging our understanding of evil, or what evil is, and even whether evil exists.
Yes.
And this is something Star Trek has done for many years. If you look through Star Trek's 60-year run, we can see how Roddenberry in the earlier years pushed back on evilness for evilness' sake, and later proteges and producers did the exact same thing. Star Trek is largely a world not governed by such concepts because historically most formalized concepts of evil are deeply entangled with notions of God or the divine. In the world of Star Trek, Dave, these things don't necessarily exist. As I said, spiritual beliefs, yes. Phenomenon that can be misconstrued as divine or divinity, yes. But not divinity as understood in theological terms.
Yes.
That is
There you go.
why there is always a bit of a pushback when these ideas are introduced, like with the Gorn being described as cosmic, the Q being mischievous and bored, a species so different from human understanding like species 10C, and now the Vesda. And also, David, in the world of Star Trek, Christianity and all of Earth's religions, brace yourself, everyone, and those of other worlds if we remember, were legends created by the entity known as the God of Shakari.
Share your pain with me.
In Star Trek V, The Final Frontier,
Yep.
the implication is that these legends arose from the entity's ability to reach out across the universe and plant visions in people's minds.
Yeah.
So this makes the concept of good and evil, in a canon sense, even more flimsy and suspect, as it appears to have been introduced by an entity attempting to free itself from a prison. Now, David, why do I bring all this up? Because it is an example of an excellent strategy and understanding of Star Trek. These producers really do understand what they have and what they need to do to make it work. Meaning, we might not always agree, Dave, with what is being done or how it is done, but for the most part, these writers are doing the hard work and they're doing some heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And that's what I can appreciate. So they float these concepts of evilness. They push the envelope. Even though evil doesn't really work in the world of Star Trek, they then come back, they smooth it out, and they make it work in Star Trek. They raise the stakes by introducing evil because they have to walk that tightrope of entertainment as well. If you adhere too much to Star Trek canon, what happens is you end up having very stale and boring stories that offer little in the way of surprise.
Yes.
So in order to create those compelling episodes that don't feel derivative, you have to introduce things that may feel contradictory at times. Because why? It works in the form of entertainment. It works to grab the audience. Then you come back and you recontextualize, you smooth, and you make it work. When you're done with it, you make it work within Star Trek. We saw the same thing in season 4, of Discovery, which I enjoyed quite a bit with Species 10C.
10C.
Though most of the season, we were led to believe that there's this evil, unexplained entity going around committing genocide for genocide's sake. And it turns out it doesn't even know we exist.
Yeah. And essentially it's the concept of being so omniscient or something so powerful that they look at us as like ants or atoms, even molecules. And we step on it and it's like, oh, we just destroyed like 10 billion of you.
How often do we pay attention to a mosquito or a gnat that's flying by?
Exactly. And that type of storytelling is really compelling when it comes to science fiction, because I'm sorry, religion does not vibe well with science fiction, because science fiction tells you, and one of the core tenets of science fiction, particularly with Star Trek, is there's always something beyond. There's always something bigger, more something. It's kind of like the progenitor thing, where they basically said, "Oh, the progenitors made us, but something made the progenitors."
Yeah,
and
there you go.
So forth and so on.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, who created the progenitors? Who created them?
So right when you think, like in season 5 Discovery, well, first in TNG, then season 5 and Discovery, you're essentially led to believe, okay, we're going to find out about the origins of humanity. And these are basically our gods. And it turns out, well, we don't actually know who created the machinery that seeded all life. So there they go again, pushing the envelope, creating compelling stories, but then bringing it right back down to zero in order to align with what Star Trek is.
And a simple way they did it, particularly in this episode for me, is they introduced the Vesda.
Yeah.
But then they had to actually make it a point that the Gorn, who is a quote-unquote evil race, villain race in New Worlds right now, is just wants to kill the Vesda, who the Vesda are like also kind of evil. So you have two evil, quote-unquote evil factions fighting against each other. So is there truly a good and evil when you have two evil factions against each other?
Right.
Who's the good side of that fight? There's none. There's no good side to that fight.
Yeah. It's solid writing,
It
Dave.
really is.
That's all I can really say.
Think about this, even down to the details of like how they used some of the characters. I seriously thought that Corby was going to be a throwaway character. That when he got introduced in Wedding Bell Blues as Chapel's new side piece and replaced Spock as her love interest, I thought that basically, okay, they're going to be basically bringing Corby, number one, just for nostalgia for nostalgia purposes, and that was it, and to simply write off the whole thing with Spock and Chapel. But they used him perfectly here because as a Star Trek fan, you know what Corby's fate is. He is going to have his mind transferred into an android and essentially die in the future. In the
Spoilers,
original
David.
series.
Spoilers.
But that's Corby's fate.
But even that, David, showing how they make things fit in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Okay, so his research led him to this place where the Vesda are being held in a prison. And they find out about this species that uses mind transference, basically. And that's essentially what his fate is. His fate is to transfer his mind from his corporeal body into, well, I guess you can also call this corporeal, into an artificial body.
Yeah, into an android.
So even little things like that, they're maintaining the proper themes even within the character arcs themselves.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean. Is kind of like when you really take a step back, the episodes to me in Strange New Worlds from season 1 to season 2 and season 3, the episodes that stand out to me is when you can sit back and you see kind of like the conspiracy theory map that we all point to, from All Is Sunny, basically just pointing at the red line and going, "Oh,
what's All
here?
Is Sunny?"
Is it,
I know what you're talking about, but there may be other people who don't. It's always sunny in Philadelphia.
I know, but like the whole meme where he's pointing at the conspiracy map and saying, "Oh, this is where this connects and this connects and this connects."
Yeah,
and it's like those are the episodes that mean a lot to me, and I'm finding that in season 3, I'm getting that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting that vibe where it's like you are connecting the dots. You are making things matter.
Yeah, without an over-reliance on fucking nostalgia.
Yes. Yeah. Because think about it. When we started Wedding Bell Blues, I honestly thought the whole bringing in
Trelane.
Trelane.
Yeah, Trelane, yeah.
I thought it was a total nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, okay, they're just bringing in Trelane because, hey, it's Strange New Worlds. It's a new character, right? No, we use that episode to explain further on as the series goes that Strange New Worlds is trying to navigate into areas that are far beyond where we've gone before. Like, I never thought that basically they would bring in a race like the Vesda, where it's like this total quote unquote evil race, this brand new evil race. I honestly thought, oh, we're going to get a run of the mill, say like a callback to the Paw race or the Prophets. That's what I was expecting. But instead we get something new, and we got something that basically recontextualizes our thoughts on how, I guess you could say, the cosmic world in Star Trek works.
Yeah. You mentioned Trelane, and of course we had essentially a Q episode as well this season. And you may say, well, that doesn't quite fit with everything they're doing this season, but I would argue it does.
It does.
If we're dealing with the cosmic and the mysterious entities that are seemingly omniscient with abilities like that of a god or gods, then I think that fits with the episode that we're talking about. And that is a theory going around the internet.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with it, and there's some pretty nerdy reasons why I don't agree with it. And I'll get into that in a second. However, one of our listeners, I don't have his name in front of me, was on our Discord. He's the one who shared that theory with us, that they believe that this unknown civilization that traveled interdimensionally and imprisoned the Vesda and learned the ways of immortality by shedding their corporeal form and becoming like cosmic energy. What was the actual? It wasn't cosmic energy. It was more scientific than that. It was subatomic instability was harnessed as a means of achieving immortality. Basically, in layman's terms, they dematerialized.
Yes, they dematerialized.
They dematerialized, they shed their corporeal form, and they ascended. Let's have some fun here. There is a lot of speculation about this new ancient civilization that imprisoned the Vesda and allegedly discovered immortality. But there's that question, who are they? Because that was one of the questions that had no answer. The episode did not provide that answer. Are they a species that we've seen before or something different? It can't be the progenitors, as they were described as being long extinct. Therefore, they didn't create immortality, right? They didn't achieve immortality.
Yes.
But it could be the species that created the machinery that the progenitors used to seed life in the galaxy.
Yes.
That would make some sense, because that would also explain where they went. Some people say the Q, as I had said a moment ago, which I'd be inclined to side with those folks because of the Wedding Bell Blues episode. It just makes sense thematically. If you see how, as we were saying, everything is very interconnected this episode or this season. But not to sound, as I said, like a Star Trek nerd, David, but the Q stand outside of time
Yes.
and are not necessarily immortal.
I think bringing in the Q is just to emphasize to the Star Trek fans and Star Trek viewers, hey,
That omniscient beings exist.
Omniscient beings
Yeah.
exist. There are beings out there that are far beyond us, and we have to be reminded about that.
Yeah. Interestingly, though, immortality, this is going to get nerdy. So immortality versus existence outside of time, right?
Yes.
So you can't have both.
No.
So immortality, let me think how to say this without sounding like a moron.
The Nexus.
Okay, so-
Nexus, Mike. Think the Nexus.
So so philosophically, which is Star Trek, which would probably be the best way to describe this, the concepts of immortality versus standing outside of time
Yes.
are very distinct, even though science fiction at times conflates them. Star Trek usually doesn't. Star Trek doesn't run into those science fiction errors. Oftentimes, they're pretty good with their science and their understanding of what they've established and how it works in the realm of scientific possibility. Now, immortality of a civilization, this usually means temporal persistence, right?
Yes.
The civilization continues indefinitely in time without succumbing to decay, collapse, or extinction. Existence outside of time, which is what the Q are, right?
Yes.
This is a qualitative rather than quantitative change.
Mm-hmm.
A civilization outside of time wouldn't just live forever. It would no longer be subject
To time.
to temporal succession at all.
It's what the villain in Star Trek Generations say. His famous, one of my favorite villain lines I've ever heard. Time is a fire in which we burn.
Right.
And that is actually very true, how Star Trek deals with the notion of immortality. It's like, how does the Nexus work? Well, the whole point of the Nexus in Generations was they get sucked into this pocket dimension where they get to live their heaven, essentially.
Yeah.
That's why Kirk is there. That's why Picard ended up being there. But time did not exist because they kept repeating what their heaven was. And they can live there forever. That's why the villain from Generations wanted to get there, because His whole motivation was to deny time.
That's interesting. I wonder if that's kind of, we're veering off into another territory, but I wonder, would the Nexus be considered outside of time?
Absolutely.
Because you're or is it a type of dimension where you can relive your greatest hits?
Well, the problem with that, with saying that, the Nexus is also a point where other beings can actually visit. Because remember, Guinan actually was able to actually get Picard out because she went into the Nexus somehow.
I'd have to read about the Nexus more in terms of canon to fully answer that question. I'm not quite sure.
But the concept of it is actually really cool.
Yeah.
When it comes to how time can work outside. It's very interstellar.
Yeah, for sure. But just in relation to the Q, because I'm trying to go back and forth, could this be the Q? I say no, because you're dealing with the notion of immortality.
Yes.
And the notion of immortality is very different from the concept of living and existing outside of time.
Mm-hmm.
However, because I'm fair, I am actually familiar somewhat with the philosophy of inverted causality. I've actually read about it. The very idea of inverted causality can prove me wrong and prove the Q believers as true. Is that the right way to say that? It can actually prove that their theories are correct there. That's better. So when it comes to inverted causality, now bear with me here, I'm going to fumble through this, where effects precede causes or where cause and effect are no longer linear, fits well with the existence of being outside of time, because being outside of time would actually dissolve the forward flow of temporal sequence.
Yeah.
So if a civilization experiences all events at once, then the ordering of cause and effect is meaningless from their perspective.
Yes.
So to them, what we call inverted causality might just be ordinary existence. It's kind of like what's on the opposite side of the Big Bang, right? People say that with the Big Bang, time is moving in the direction that we're all familiar with, in a linear forward fashion, at least from our perspective. But on the opposite side of that Big Bang, a lot of scientific theory will say that time is moving in reverse in the opposite direction. And anyone that may exist on the other side of that Big Bang are experiencing time in ways that we can't comprehend.
Yes.
They think this is the right flow of time. So when you throw the idea of inverted causality, it actually does work. Now, the notion of immortality doesn't necessarily work in a technical term with existing outside of time, but with the inclusion of inverted causality, suddenly now the idea of existing outside of time does work and pair well with this episode. Therefore, David, I must remove my doubts.
Well, that's the problem.
I still don't think it is. However, there are more points on the Q side than there are against.
Yeah. The thing with the Q that I feel is the Q are, I'm a believer that basically the Q are outside of time.
Yeah, that's they've said that, yeah.
Because like when you go to Picard season 2, I think? Yeah, season 2, when Q goes on to explain his existence to Picard, and you have those moments when he says, you humans keep thinking about time as forward and backward. And it's one of the things that basically me and you have pointed out. People are confused of how Q is used in season 2 and then into season 3, especially when you get to the end when Jack is confronted by Q, and when Q looks at Jack and tells him, you humans think too linear.
Mm-hmm.
You think you were told I died, basically. But who's to say that basically that's me? I don't live in that linear time that you guys do.
Yeah. Or it could very well be him, but what is death when you stand outside of time? You exist outside of time, therefore you can possibly witness your death,
Yeah. But then continue living.
Yeah. That's another reason why, David, that it possibly might not be the Q, because if we're talking about immortality, we know the Q now die.
Yeah, the Q can
But
die.
again, death is relative. So it's all types of fuckery going on.
Oh yeah, and that's the beautiful thing. That's why I try to play it safe and say the Star Trek Strange New Worlds writers are just trying to ease us into it and show us there's more omniscience out there.
Yes, that's what it's about. There's definitely that theme going through. Maybe not a theme, but it definitely is a narrative thread that is keeping the season so far woven together.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I'm like going with, especially with this particular episode, they effectively have actually somehow and some way have created like this cohesion that we all can follow, but not have the continuity, nerd alarm get hit.
No, not at all.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it works. It's working in our nerd brain.
Yeah, I would have no problem if this mysterious civilization ends up being the Q. I mean, I personally believe there are some things that don't need to be explained, and the Q's origin isn't really necessary, but as long as you don't diminish their purpose in Star Trek and what they represent, then I really have no problem with anything that you pushed through, as long as it's smart. And an episode like this, if people can't tell, we believe anyways, is a very good example of understanding a material, understanding writing strategy, because it has it all. And to be halfway through the season and to feel this good gives me hope, because it feels like in 5 episodes, despite me always wanting more because I'm a greedy Star Trek fan, I feel like if the next 5 episodes are like this will feel like the most complete, the most fullest season. Because look how much ground in terms of, forget plot progression, okay?
Yeah.
Look at character progression.
That's the key.
We've had so much character progression in just 5 episodes.
Mm-hmm. I do not. It's amazing to me. I look at Strange New World season 3, and I'm like going, none of the characters feel wasted.
I almost feel like they listened to us, David. Do you remember, which I do know, several people on the production side of Discovery was listening to us regularly.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're listening to us for Strange New Worlds too. But I forgot my train of thought, David. Oh, my God. Oh, we said this last season, at the end of last season. We said we really like this season. It's not bad. But if they're going to give us only 10 episodes, you have to cut back on some of the filler type things. You don't have time for these one-off episodes. If you want to do a one-off episode, that's fine, but make sure it's not just a one-off episode.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you fill that episode up with other character aspects. It's like almost like Game of Thrones, for its first 3 seasons, where they may have an entire season that you only saw a character once, but they always reminded us of their story until they were important. You can do that in a smaller, shorter scale with Star Trek in a season. You may not have time to give us a full 20 minutes of something different or something that continues a thread from the previous episode, but if you remind us, 30 seconds is more than enough. And that's what they've done throughout the season so far. They have continued to remind us of little things that they've introduced that doesn't necessarily distract from the immediate episode and what they're doing, but it reminds us and keeps us aware of what's on the back burner, and it's going to be relevant again. And that's why this season so far is incredibly strong in terms of consistency. It's very consistent. All right, David. Well, this does bring us to the end of our discussion. I'm going to give this episode. Are you ready, David? It's not that. But
not that. Not yet.
Almost, though, dude. I almost did, but that was not me being, objective. 97%. That's objective.
I actually am 1 point higher than you
Really?
because I love this episode.
So
I gave it
good.
a 98 because I'm like going, I had fun with a lot of the past episodes.
See, that's the thing I keep forgetting to say. It's fun,
It's
too.
fun.
It's fun.
But this episode in particular is even more fun because I've had so much fun having discussions with other Trek fans saying like, you guys know what they're talking about. What is this all about? What is this all about? Oh, do you know this connection? Like, I have not had a lot of fun discussions with Star Trek as much as I had with this particular episode. Because people have discussed about me about connections about the original series, about Corby. Like everyone basically even stated it was like funny to some viewers, and I told them, yeah, I noticed it too. They use Corby in this episode specifically because why? Oh, the alien race that they happen to be dealing with deals with mind transference.
Yeah.
Oh, what's his fate?
Yeah. I'm also wondering if there was something dealing with, I haven't had a chance to fully analyze this. I will after this week. I'll go back and watch again. But it also felt like they were doing something in terms of the duality because you had the pairs again.
Yes. That was genius.
And that's all I'm going to say because I don't know. I haven't thought about it enough to form a coherent, intelligent thought about it. But there are more things happening in this episode that I have not had a chance to get to yet and break down and analyze. There's a lot. And that's why I was going to say it's 100% because there is so much happening in this episode. At the same time, it doesn't feel overstuffed. It feels
challenge,
It
Mike.
feels just right.
Who will be the first one this season between me and you to give 100? Because that's
You.
the thing. I'm trying to be diligent, but the more me and you have discussed about season 3, I am actually legitimately waiting for that episode that you say it's 100.
Yeah. Have we given an episode 100 yet? I can't remember. I think we did.
Did we give the 100 to the Mbanga episode? Because that episode was so good.
I can't remember, but we'll have to go back and check it out.
Yeah.
I have it all saved on a document someplace. All right. Well, Dave, that's it for us. I do want to remind the listeners before we go that we do need your support. If you cannot go to Patreon and subscribe for at least $1 a month or even $5, at least go to our iOS. Our iOS. That's not the way you say that. Go to our Apple Podcast feed.
There you go.
And give us a thumbs up under that rating section. And if you have the time, I'd also appreciate a review. But a thumbs up on the rating, 4-star, no 1-stars, please. 4-star, 5-star is greatly appreciated. It does help us out. And I'm surprised that more people haven't given us a rating. We're stuck at like a 15 ratings. I'm like, guys,
come on.
Like that's just laziness. I know how many people listen to our Star Trek podcast. I would not be sitting here doing extensive analysis if we didn't have listeners. And I need you guys to rate things. It's so stupid. That's the only time I'm gonna get aggressive like that. Hey, listen, I did these same warnings for 5 of our other big shows.
Hey, yeah.
And do they exist anymore on this network?
Not anymore.
Nope.
No.
So if you want Star Trek to go away, keep ignoring. If you want me to keep doing this show, the last podcast on this network that is incredibly consistent, then please, we need your help.
We are the Verda, okay?
The Vesda.
Or Vesda.
Who's the Verda?
I don't know.
Just making up names now. All right. I forgot. Oh, we're ending the show.
Ending the
wow.
show.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Live long and prosper.